Hi, my name is Jenna Solheim, and I am presenting the African American ethnicity for my ethnicity project for my group. First off, I'm going to define ethnicity. Ethnicity is defined as identifying with a social group based on similar beliefs, traditions, and cultures. As you probably know, there are 6 different major ethnic groups. Also, African Americans compose one of the largest ethnic groups in the United States. Some key aspects of African Americans, their roots lie in Africa and the Caribbean islands. Slavery is a very big part of how African Americans came to the United States. They were brought here from Africa, and for the first 400 years, I believe, there were slaves in the United States. As it says next, they were brought from their home, just like, denied basic human rights for 100 years. And even now, they're still fighting for equal rights. That has been an ongoing battle. So the struggles throughout history, slavery began in the early 1600s from the African shore to Virginia. Later, the need for slaves increased in the late 1700s as the cotton industry boomed. Slaves presented a cheap form of labor, and so that increased the demand for them. Later, Jim Crow laws enforced racial segregation. They stated that as long as facilities were separate but equal, it was lawful. The issue with this is it forced segregation. It made it so discrimination was okay, and they made it most of the time, while the facilities were separate, they were not often equal. Redlining is also a form of discrimination that has been going on throughout history. It was a practice that prohibited people who lived in highly African American populated areas from getting bank loans. The banks would draw red lines on the map, and anyone who lived there would not be allowed to get a loan. Stereotypes, obviously there are many stereotypes that go along with every ethnicity, and it would be ignorant of us to not acknowledge what the stereotypes that still take place today. One stereotype that is commonly thought of with African Americans is issues with crime and welfare, and this is obviously an issue because this social aspect of it in society, how people are treated, and as far as like police searches and the crime rate, and everything is affected just by this one single stereotype. And obviously it's not true, because I know people who are not criminals. Anyone could be a criminal. It does not have anything to do with your ethnicity whatsoever. Cultural impact on the U.S. So African Americans have brought so much culture to the United States. Their music, for one, hip-hop, jazz, rap, all those have started from African American people or groups. And not only that, other things like call and response forms, ring shouts, the earliest forms of jazz, like those all originated from Africa specifically, and then more has grown from that. And so you can only imagine how great that has impacted the entire music industry. Their art is another example. My group mates put on here how there was a exhibit in New Orleans that displayed a drum, and I'm assuming it's a drum that's still used today, that's used here, and has ties to Congo music and came from Africa. Moving on to the current historical figures, there's a historic locust grove, which its mission is to preserve and interpret the remaining 55 acres of William Croghan's estate, which is a collection and grounds as examples of early 19th century frontier America, and to share the stories of the many people who contributed to the history of the site. George Rogers Clark, It emphasizes his experience, and he was a Revolutionary War hero and founder of Louisville. Moving on to issues of today. So today, African Americans fight for equality, to stop police brutality, gentrification, and they fight for economic reform. African Americans continue to fight for equality. First off, they've been doing it for hundreds of years, and they're still doing it today. Obviously, tremendous strides have been made to bring African Americans and others more equal grounds, but it is still not completely equal, and that is continuing to be fought for on a daily basis. It states here that a black person is 5 times more likely to be stopped without just cause than a white person. Police brutality has been a prominent issue in the media lately and a major source for Black Lives Matter protests. There's been multiple instances where African Americans have unjustly died because of these kind of issues. Gentrification has also been an issue, but today more people are finally aware of its consequences. Gentrification typically occurs in poorer neighborhoods and turned into housing or corporate spaces for wealthier citizens. This results in displacement for the people who lived in the area. Gentrification is one of the contributing factors towards systemic racism in the U.S. And also economic reform. There is a constant fight for economic reform among African Americans. It states here that the U.S. economy was built on the exploitation and occupational segregation of people of color. Current events. As most of you probably know, Black Lives Matter movement is very prominent in the society right now. It started on July 13th, 2013, and it has continued to this day. This movement has grown exponentially over the last year. Thousands of communities all over the country have hosted rallies, protests, and other public gatherings to support and defend African American lives and rights. Police brutality, as I already mentioned, it's a major point for the Black Lives Matter movement. The current pandemic, COVID-19, has exposed many racial injustices. African Americans were heavily impacted by COVID-19, and according to National Geographic, the crisis has already forced some 440,000 Black-owned enterprises to shut their doors permanently. So not only did it affect them in the workplace, but the CDC also reported that African Americans were 2.6 times more likely to get the virus and 2.1 times more likely to die from it than a white person. Also, the struggle for African American representation in the entertainment industry continues. However, there has been more attention called to the issue. Recently, Zendaya just won an Emmy for the lead actress in a drama series, and her win is only the second time a black actress has ever won the category. Black producers and actors have always fought for equal pay and praise, but they have done so more prominently and recently. So within Oklahoma, a major thing that has been talked about lately is the Tulsa Massacre. It happened in the Greenwood District, which was a predominantly black district in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was known as Black Wall Street. It was a calculated attack after there was a false sexual accusation by a white woman against a black young elevator operator. They massacred hundreds of black citizens and destroyed over 1,000 houses. This whole community was practically burned to the ground. It was a functioning society in itself. It had schools, its own post office, and everything was damaged, and it was never the same. And currently efforts are efforts made to memorialize that tragedy. I know the Greenwood District is creating a memorial that people can go to, and it'll be a museum. One of the reasons that no one really knew about this Tulsa Massacre, that it was covered up, is because they didn't want it to deter people from moving there. They thought that if people talked about it, it would happen again. So that's why no one was really taught about it until recently. So for group reflection, we have learned so much from this presentation, going to I thought I knew a lot, and obviously I didn't. Going through, I've learned a lot more of what's going on now, and I've discovered a lot of things that I didn't know about the past. Here are references. All of us compiled them and cited them. And then Q&A, I just went through, and I know people can't ask questions right now, so I just went and looked up some questions that people may have. And the first one was, what can a white person do to help fight racism? I found myself asking that before, so I figured others might. And the answer I found is that educating yourself is the first thing you can do to fight racism. Knowing what is considered racist and how to react to racism is very important. You can't know what to fight if you don't know what you're fighting. What is the preferred terminology? Black, African American, or people of color. So technically, Black refers to dark-skinned people who descended from Africa. African Americans are Black people who were born in the U.S., and people of color refer to everyone who has a skin color other than white. So that was the information I was able to find on the internet. Thank you for listening to her presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned at least one piece of new information. Thanks.